Good evening, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Executive Scrutiny Board. As I have apologies from the Chair and both Vice Chairs, the first item of business is the appointment of Chair. Councillor Matthew Holmes has told me he's willing to chair the meeting if you're all in agreement. We have two vice chairs, and they are the chairs of individual scrutiny boards, but unfortunately they are unable to make this meeting. No. Is everyone happy? Great. Well, I'll hand over to you then, Councillor Holmes. Thank you. Thanks very much.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Executive Scrutiny, Tuesday, 11th of September 2023. I will get straight on to the agenda. Apologies, there's a few.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I have apologies from Councillors Eyre, Philip Ingle, Mulhall and Poulter. Thank you.
Which is why you've got me. Councillor Kerr.
If we haven't finished the meeting by 7:30, I will need to go about then.
No problem at all. Okay, thank you. Moving on, late items, I'm not aware of any. Item 3 is declarations of interest. Are there any? Okay, no. Item 4 is to agree the minutes of the meeting held on the 31st July 2023. Are there any matters arising? Are we okay to agree those as printed? Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item 5, which is the forward plan, which is attached in our report. Do we have an officer that's just going to give us a brief overview of that, or are we just going to take it and note it? Latter. Is everyone happy? Okay. Now there's also item 6, which is the Council Cabinet responses to the scrutiny recommendations of the previous meeting. They're attached. I think they're to note. Okay. And moving swiftly on to the meat, which is the Council Cabinet agenda, which is attached. And I will zip to item 8, which is development of the Riverside site on Duke Street. Catherine, are you going to do this one, or is it? Oh, Ian. Thank you, Ian.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Ian Fulliger, Head of Strategic Housing at the Council. Thank you, Chair. Members will be very familiar with our ambitions to increase both the scale and the pace of the new affordable housing that we build ourselves within the city. Indeed, our HRA, our Housing Revenue Account business plan, has the finances in place for us to build or buy up to 100 homes every year. And this particular scheme is very much part of that. It's a scheme on the former Britannia Court site down at Duke Street, adjacent to the river. It's a scheme for 12 houses, 6 of them 2 beds, 2 of them 3 beds, and 4 of them 4 beds. Despite the new flood wall that runs adjacent to the river, there is still a theoretical risk that this site could flood, and for those reasons we're not allowed to build on the ground floor, or we're not allowed to have habitable rooms on the ground floor. So this is a slightly unusual scheme in that the habitable rooms will start on the first floor and then go higher. The ground floor of this scheme will be used for bike storage generally, and a downstairs toilet. All of these homes will be built to the Future Home Standard. That standard should see that these homes use between 75 and 80% less carbon than other homes currently being built in the city to the current building standard. The houses will include PV panels, air source heat pumps. They'll include either a sprinkler or a misting system, and they should be completed during the summer of 2025. And this site will form a part of a package of 6 sites that we plan to go out to the market to get one contractor to deliver 6 sites for us. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Open this up. Any questions? Councillor Bolt.
Yeah, I think this is generally a welcome scheme. We do need more affordable homes in the city, as we all know. The only concern I had, and Ian's covered it, is regarding the flooding issue, because clearly it's right near the River Derwent. But Ian's reassured me about that. So I think on the whole, yes, I am supportive of this.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton. Good to know. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you, Chair. I've got a couple of questions. One is related specifically to that site, and the other one is the expectation in terms of the procurement of the build contract. So to the first one, given that the ground floor isn't appropriate for residential uses, were other potential uses explored, which could be small commercial units, or it could be something else, possibly storage or more commercial storage rather than housing? And if that wasn't explored, is there a good reason why it wasn't explored? And the second question is about the tendering. As an authority, we should be encouraging our small businesses to grow. By bundling a number of different projects together, we're reducing the number of businesses that will have the capacity to be able to bid for a combined number of builds, rather than looking at them separately, which a large company could do, or a small company could also do. So I want to know the logic from the point of view of the council, as opposed to the point of view of Derby Homes, who will be overseeing this, where it might be easier to oversee one company rather than several. Why is it better from the council's perspective to look for a big person rather than to encourage small companies to grow?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor. We have considered alternative uses for the ground floor units. It was found that we didn't have sufficient confidence that commercial units would succeed in those comparatively small areas underneath the houses. It was also found that they could lead to difficulties with the houses above and then having rear gardens immediately behind. So it is something that we've discounted. In addition, the actual layout of the houses proposed does make use of those spaces. There is a ground floor WC, there is bike storage, there is other storage areas on the ground floor. So it is a space that is utilised by the householders. And obviously, if it was used, or those spaces were used by commercial units, the WC, the bike storage would have to be at first floor level, and obviously that introduces complications getting bikes up to the first floor and so on. In relation to the second point, the procurement, I think it is really a choice. We've done lots of previous schemes where they have been taken in isolation and they have been taken forward by smaller builders. This time we wanted a change in approach to see whether we could firstly have an impact on the cost. Obviously, we're all very familiar with the extreme price inflation in the building industry that has happened since COVID. So this is a measure to try and mitigate against that cost increase and also enable us to move at greater pace. And Councillor has touched on the point, there is also a resource issue in the council within our own development teams, and it will be easier for us to work with one contractor who will take these 6 sites forward rather than trying to project manage 6 different contractors, Chair. So it is a resource issue within the council. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Carey, are you satisfied with that response? Any other detail that you'd like to ask about?
Thanks, Chair. I think if we started with the expectation that we might want to put commercial on the ground floor, we might do a different ground floor design and a different layout design, and it would start with a different mindset. But given the time we're at now, I think that it's a pity, but it's something that we need to look past and move forward on. Regarding separate builds, are there other members who think that the council might be missing out on an opportunity for small businesses here, and to suggest to Cabinet that maybe they ought to consider this as an aspect? I don't feel strongly about this, but if others thought it would be useful, then I'm happy to put some words together as a proposal to Cabinet.
You need a seconder, Councillor Kerr, so if you wanted to put a recommendation forward, you'd have to find a seconder.
Exactly, Chair. If people don't think this is important, I won't start putting the thinking cap on to come up with the words.
I'm not seeing any nodding heads, Councillor Kerr. I think the issue of OCOR, the principle of allowing or building potentially to flood on the ground floor is a sound one. Obviously, it limits the use from the very, very start of OCOR. That was always a principle to ensure that we could regenerate areas that would otherwise sit unregenerated or built on. Many ways to do it, but if you're going to build a structure, fully support what you're doing. I've been involved, obviously, as a Cabinet member, so it's a balance. I've got a couple of questions, if I may. I've made some notes because there was a question really on the budget. So, in terms of best value from the contractor when via the procurement, whilst we obviously have to set a budget, isn't publicly stating the budget kind of like suggesting that will be the budget? And how do we mitigate against potential increases as well to that budget limit that's been potentially agreed by Cabinet tomorrow, but also assurances that we won't exceed that and the contractor come back and say we need some more money for X, Y or Z. And then finally, sorry, I said 2 questions, it's probably 3. I am slightly confused by 7.3 that said HRA capital has been taken to be borrowing at the typical rate. But the HRA is capital already, so I'm a bit confused if you can explain to me why that would be considered borrowing when it's actually capital funds already. Please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, we agree. And on the Cabinet agenda tomorrow, there is in fact 2 papers, and there is a confidential paper where we talk in the detail about the funding, Chair, because we agree with yourself that if we were to put the overall budget in the public domain, potentially contractors could look that up and then they know what our budget is and could give them commercial advantage. So I'm happy to pick up any detailed questions about the budget in the confidential bit tonight, Chair. And forgive me, what was the second question?
The second was assurances on overspend of the budget. So the contractor's coming back and saying we've got a slight problem that wasn't foreseen and we now need X amount more.
Thank you, Chair. So we have put in what we consider to be a generous contingency because of the price inflation that the industry is seeing at the moment. We are regularly talking to our cost consultants, and they are giving us updates on the cost plan. So we do have confidence at this point, but as I said, there is a contingency there to cover off any unforeseen or unexpected increases, Chair.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions at all? Okay. Right, no recommendations then? Nothing to note? Okay. Moving on, item 9, which is update on Darley Abbey Mills Bridge. Verna.
Thank you, Chair. Verna Bayliss, Director of Sustainability. As members will be aware, in July last year, Cabinet approved the installation of a prefabricated footbridge and access ramps at Darby Abbey Mills, which is now known as the Walters Walkway. And this followed an earlier emergency inspection of the original Mills Bridge, which led to the access of the bridge being closed because of the risk to public safety. So, as you also probably know, the original bridge is not part of the public highway and had previously been in private ownership before falling by default to the Crown Estate following that private ownership going into administration. So, as with all river crossings, the bridge really did provide a vital access for local people and businesses, and also some flood risk resilience. So there were some very strong representations that the council should do something, and therefore Cabinet took that decision to install a bridge, and that bridge is for cyclists and for pedestrians. So that was our short-term response. So with that in place, the discussions are ongoing with key stakeholders on what that longer-term solution would be. And that's going to take a little bit of time because there are issues like ownership, funding for what that permanent bridge will look like, where it be sited, etc., etc. So the 500k revenue funding that was agreed at that July Cabinet last year is now coming to an end, and so we need to look to what we're going to do in the medium term to ensure that there's that continued access, confidence for local residents and businesses while we work on that long-term solution. So those options are set out in the report. So if the removal of the bridge is discounted, as we set out in the report, there are essentially two options. We either continue to rent the bridge, as we are now, or we buy it. Neither option comes without creating a budget pressure, I'm afraid, but the purchase option does reduce the council's financial exposure significantly. Also, making the decision now allows us to think about this pressure and consider how it will be handled in the overall MTFP process this year. So it is stated in the report, but absolutely for the sake of clarity, this is a pragmatic proposal to cap our costs while we get on with working on what that permanent solution is over the next 5 years. It's not us saying this is what we're going to do and walking away. This is buying us that medium-term solution. So the recommendation is set out in the report, and it's therefore to purchase the existing prefabricated footbridge and access ramps.
Thank you very much. Open this up to councillors. Does anyone have any comments or questions? Councillor Wilson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I think it can be discounted to remove the bridge because this is a really important crossing point for local people from Darley, but everyone who uses the park really, and really prevents people tend to walk around the perimeter in a circular walk, and it really prevents people from doing that and using the park to its fullest capacity if people can't do that. So I do think it's important that there is a replacement in the medium term, and of the two options, this one looks to be the most cost effective from the papers, so I would support it on that basis. My question really is about the Crown Estate and their responsibility, because they are ultimately the owners, and I'm sure efforts have been made to try and get some responsibility to be taken there, but perhaps if officers could just update us on what the latest position is with the Crown Estate in all of this. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. As I've said, there is continued local political engagement on this, and alongside the Environment Agency, all the key stakeholders, mill owners, etc. And you know, as you can imagine, those are quite delicate and sensitive conversations, including what we do about ownership. So, I mean, that will be subject to a further report, really, once we've decided on what the long-term solution is. But absolutely accept it, and I think it's articulated in the report. Obviously, you know, there is a risk in taking this action that around the ownership, but you know, we'll work through that over the next 5 years. Is all I can say at this stage.
Thank you. I think Councillor Kerr, then Councillor Carr.
Thank you. I'm sure you're aware that the local community in Darley Abbey have aspirations for having a turbine across the weir, and it just comes that if there's going to be that sort of development happening in the area, there might be an opportunity to look at the bridge and the need to incorporate a route for the bridge at the same time. And I'm just hoping that that is being pursued very actively. And I think from the point of view of people in that area, they would really like to have a route that is also available for vehicles, for road vehicles, rather for motor vehicles, rather than only for walkers and cyclists. So I'm sure that's part of a specification, but I think it's something that shouldn't be lost contact with. With some assurance on that, please.
Absolutely, Councillor Kerr. Both of those options are being considered, and we be part of those wider. There are ongoing conversations with the community and with, as I say, with the businesses and the key stakeholders around this bridge. And yes, both of those points are being made very strongly by the community and their aspirations. So we're very much working with them. But again, that will be subject to a further report when we're ready to make those sorts of decisions.
Thank you. Councillor Carr. Just press your button.
I'm supportive of buying the bridge, but a simple question is it for 5 years? So what's the limit of the bridge? So when we structurally put a proper bridge in, what will happen to this bridge?
So we'll have options when we come to decide that. So we could reuse it. There may be somewhere else that we might choose to relocate it, or there will be options to sell back or to sell on. So you know, we'll have to consider that when the time comes. But very much those principles of reuse, recycle will be at our foremost thoughts.
Thank you. I've got a couple of questions. Made some notes again, so just bear with me a second. So we've got an estimated ongoing cost of 555,000. If the costs incurred to date are 380,000, where has the 555,000 come from in terms of, you know, a little bit of clarity on the robustness of that figure, please? On the actual and on the revenue pressure, so it says 44,000 ongoing revenue cost, which is key because obviously revenue hits hardest in terms of setting budgets in this council. We all know that. Forgive me, but it doesn't seem clear whether that's per year or over the estimated 5 years. So, could you answer that, please?
Yep, I think the budget is estimated over the 5 years, isn't it? As far as I'm aware. So I will come back to you with absolute clarity on that. But that is the estimated revenue required for the inspections and maintenance. And again, that is, you know, that it is an estimated cost, but we do that with the bridge supplier and with our own understanding of the inspections and maintenance regime that we are carrying out now on the bridge. So, and we will, of course, because it is a revenue pressure, we will, of course, look to how we might try and reduce that over the lifetime of this medium-term solution. But the key thing we're hearing from the community and from all stakeholders is they want us to concentrate on getting that long-term solution sorted. So that will be our focus, but we will try and, obviously, as along the way, reduce that, try and reduce that revenue pressure and work with finance.
Thank you. Just on the first point then, do we have any clarity on if the actual costs up until this point are 380,000, where has the 555,000 come from in terms of estimate? I mean, how has that been robustly estimated?
So our estimate is done with, so we are carrying out maintenance and inspection on the bridge now. So we understand what that will be, and we understand from the lifetime of the bridge how that will translate over the next 5 years. So we have done that through our own estimation. We will check that against and use independent assurance to ensure that we are looking at the right figures. So based on our experience and our understanding of the hire of the bridge, etc., this figure is built up on that from our understanding and our knowledge of what the costs are to date.
Thank you. And so just to clarify on the 44,000 revenue impact, it's assumed, or you're almost confirming that that's the total over the 5 years, not yearly? Because that's a big difference. I mean, I'm assuming that it will be, but I think that's something that really does need to be clarified, because there's a huge difference between, what would it be, 260,000 odd compared to 44,000. You know, that's a big difference. Are there any more questions on the floor at all? Okay. Any recommendations to Cabinet on this? No?
Chair, I recommend to support it.
Yeah.
Okay. Recognise the need for the bridge to support residents and local businesses, I think, is
Chair, just to be clear, Chair, then all members are in agreement with that? You support this? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 10, which is the additional capital loan request.
Thank you,
It
Chair.
is you this time,
It's me
Catherine.
this time, yes. Good evening, everyone. Catherine Williams, Head of Regeneration and Economic Growth. So this report relates to the Great Northern Classics project, which is a new start business bringing a new facility to what was the Rolls-Royce Heritage Centre in Osmaston. And this facility, it's on site now and work is in progress, and it will be focusing on preserving and developing skills for the classic vehicle industry. And that is an industry that we know is suffering significant skills shortages because of the demographic of people who currently work in that sector. Previously, in March this year, a loan was approved of 1.25 million to help this project go ahead, and that has been supplemented with a further £1 million of investment from the founders and other investors. At the time of that previous approval, the council were asked for a loan of 1.5 million. The 1.25 million was awarded because at that time, the difference between that, the £250,000, related to contingency. So we didn't feel comfortable offering a loan for contingency on cost. That was one reason, and the other reason was that the business were in the process of securing additional investment. So what's happened since then is work's progressed on site, and that further £250,000 is now required to complete the works, and the business owners' efforts to secure investment have finished, and they've maximised the investment they can secure for other sources. So the ask is for a further £250,000 lending on similar terms to the original loan, and that will enable the project to complete. The report includes the various benefits that will be achieved through this project. Up to 32 small businesses could be accommodated at the facility on site. About 100 new jobs are expected to be created, and also there's a link with the wider Osmaston regeneration programme that's been happening in that area for a number of years. So there's lots of benefits, and obviously it's about heritage and engineering at its core. Both of those are really important themes for Derby as a city. So in terms of the financial implications and the risk, obviously it's lending, so the money will be paid back on commercial terms, and the loan in its entirety, both the original 1.25 million and this additional request, are secured on the site, and that site has been valued in excess, well in excess of that loan. So that means that from a council's risk perspective, that's mitigated. And then my final point is that obviously it's important that we help to see this project through to conclusion, given all the benefits that can be accrued, but also to ensure that that original loan is honoured and repaid. So there's, members will note there's an additional pink paper with some relatively minor detailed additional commercial terms in there for consideration, but most of the information about this project is in the white paper, so happy to answer questions. And my colleague Steve Turner, who's done all of the work on this, has joined tonight to help as well if required. So thank you.
Thank you. Open this to the floor. Councillor Kerr.
The report really talks up what this site may be, both in terms of its training opportunities and its potential tourist opportunities as well. And clearly the business case is looking sufficiently robust for it to be repaying our loan within, I think, 5 years, which all sounds really good. And I just feel at the back of my mind, is if this really is as good as being sold, have we considered it as something that we actually want to retain an interest in the long term, and to have shareholders' profits coming back to us on a periodic basis as an alternative to having the substantive repaid? And I wondered if that had been explored.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kerr. I'll make an initial response, and if Steve has anything to add, I'm sure he will. Ordinarily, the Council's financial support to businesses, and this is essentially a new start business, in the past has been through grants or through lending. We have explored an option of equity type investment in companies, but for various legal and practical reasons, that's not been considered workable or preferable to the approach we take now, which is basically to lend money and obviously get that paid back. We do charge on commercial terms and our fees are paid, so there is a return for the council, but broadly speaking, that's the reason why we're considering this approach on the same basis as the other financial assistance schemes we've run, like, for example, Derby Enterprise Growth Zone, etc. So I don't know whether there's anything else there. So, yeah. Answer, thank you.
May I just ask, is that something that has been explored with our Treasury Management or other finance colleagues as an alternative to think about? And, or if not, is it something that as a council taking a more commercial look at the way we do our business, as to whether it is something that we should explore in more often as an organisation?
I don't know whether Tony
I can come in on that. For a Treasury Management point of view, we wouldn't be able to do that according to the CITFA code, but we could do it in on a regen basis. So we could work with the regen team to do that, but for Treasury Management decisions, that's not part of our strategy.
So just to clarify, so it could be part of a wider council investment strategy, but not specifically to do with Treasury Management. Yeah, no, I accept that. Yeah, but it hasn't been discussed with you. No. Chair, if other people think that that might be a useful thing for the council to do, that is something that we might put a recommendation to Cabinet on.
It's in your gift to propose a recommendation, Councillor Kerr, and find a seconder.
Anybody interested in seconding me?
I'm sorry, you're on your own again, Councillor Kerr. Catherine.
Chair, sorry, Councillor Kerr, there's probably one other point that I'll just make in terms of the reason why we haven't done things in that way in the past, and there's a skills issue as well in terms of financial assistance. We're a local authority with a certain skill set to manage financial assistance schemes, but not to manage equity-based investments. That's quite a different discipline, so it will be a different approach altogether.
Thank you. Are there anybody else? Oh, Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Chair. Our loan is obviously part of a larger cost to deliver the project. Is our funding been set for a specific part of the project to fund, or is it viewed as money going into the pot in order to deliver the wider project? First question. And Secondly, I don't know if you could perhaps describe where the site is on Osmaston Road, and I guess the bulk of the funding is to refurbish a building, and perhaps just a bit more detail on what's that's entailed in terms of the renovation to the building.
So I'll let Steve start with answer to the first point, and I'll try and answer the second thing.
Yeah, in terms of where the fund is going towards, essentially it's part of the refurbishment and conversion package. So it's not necessarily against a particular item within that. It's just part of that totality of support to basically get it from being what was a unloved derelict site to operational, but it's not particularly focused on any given cost, but it's essentially got the capital conversion and refurbishment cost, which number that 2.5 million in total.
And then in terms of its location, it's the former Rolls-Royce Heritage Centre in Osmaston, and it sits immediately next to what was the light alloy foundry site as well in Osmaston, both of which have been derelict and underutilised for a number of years. So this project is bringing forward the regeneration of the heritage building itself, and there's work underway through a private developer, Ivy Grove, on the light alloy foundry site next door to bring forward new developments. And in fact, there's a connection there because some of the businesses that are relocating from Castle Ward in order to allow for the new residential development there are moving to what's going to be called Merlin Park immediately next door. So there's quite a lot of work that we've managed to draw together in that part of the city.
Thank you, Catherine. Councillor Kerr.
Thank you. I just wondered, this is coming out of the Ascend capital budget. How much money is there in that at the moment? Is this additional loan all contained within that ring-fenced element?
Yes, there's an existing budget on the capital programme for Ascend. I don't have the exact amounts tonight. We can share that with you, Councillor Kerr, of what amount is on that budget within the capital programme. But this is being taken out of that, so it's not additional funding, it's not an additional ask, it won't require any additional borrowing, it's from within an existing envelope on the capital programme.
Sorry, Catherine, there's about circa 2 million. There's about 2 million in the capital budget that's coming from for Ascend. Yeah.
Thank you. 4.4 suggests a GVA of 4 million per annum, potentially more, which obviously is fantastic if it can be achieved, and if it can be even bigger than that, then all the better. I do have one query though. It's a concern really. In answering this, obviously you need to stay within the pink papers or the confidentiality. Just consider those when you give me this reply. But does the loss of the funding, in terms of the assumed private funding sources, the loss of that, does that impact, what kind of impact does it have on the business plan? Does it potentially mean that there may be future requests from the council for loans or grants? And it was presumed, and again, you have to be careful in how you answer this, I would have thought, but was that particular loan that is no longer, or the funding, sorry, that is no longer available, was that just based on a return of the money with some interest, or was there more to it in terms of value to the business? So what I'm trying to say is, how much of a blow was that funding source loss? What lies behind it, and what impact is that going to have on the viability of the project as a whole?
Well, I'll give a certain answer now, and if maybe we do want to explore it in any more detail under the confidential part of the agenda, we can. But broadly speaking, the investment that's been sought for this project is to fund the upfront capital costs of all of the refurbishment that Steve described, totalling 2.5 million. The only gap that hasn't been achieved is the $250,000 that we're obviously here today and tomorrow to discuss and seek cabinet approval for. In terms of the ongoing business plan, that investment is there to invest in the capital that then generates the facility, that then generates the income upon which the business plan is founded. So if the cabinet approve the additional $250,000 tomorrow, then that will be sufficient to complete the project, get the business up and running, and the rest is obviously down to the success of the business in terms of meeting the forecasts in the business plan. So I don't know whether that perhaps answers your question partially, and if there's any further exploration, maybe we could go into that later under.
But officers are fully aware of the situation, have discussed the detail behind that, the loss of that particular funding stream, is that?
Yes, yeah. We're confident on the numbers given that the budget is pretty reliable now. So we're not talking about they are very close to completion. So we've been doing site visits ahead of every drawdown on the existing loan. So the existing loan, they've drawn down £250,000 at a time. So we've been doing site visits ahead of each drawdown, and works are at a point now where we're very comfortable that the budget they've now set is what they require. And so they don't need any further investment to get the doors open, so to speak. And then the income from that point then comes from trading.
Thank you. Any further comments? Councillor Kerr, for your last contribution.
Thank you. Yeah, it's on 10.1. There is a comment about the legal charge on the land registry of not registered the transfer of site ownership. And it seems as though it's just a backlogging at the land registry. I just wondered whether there was a way in which we could be assured that that has transferred before we give them any more money. If that land registry transfer doesn't go through, it seems a bit of a...
Yes, essentially we are going to propose something that we won't draw down this last payment until that's in place.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions? No? Any recommendations to Cabinet on this item? No? Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to item 11, which is capital loan for city centre property purchase. I'm guessing it's Catherine. I'm right this time.
Yes. Thank you, Chair. Again, for members, there are 2 reports under consideration tomorrow by Cabinet relating to this opportunity. It's slightly different to the last one in that there are still significant commercial reasons why we're not in a position yet to disclose full details of the location or the parties involved in this. So I expect there can be more conversation and questions under the confidential item at the end. But essentially this is about an exciting opportunity to help in our efforts to transform and regenerate the city centre. And we have an opportunity to support a project to bring some significant properties in the city centre back into use that will create new residential, workspace, hospitality benefits. And as I say, the full details are in the confidential paper. Thank you.
Thank you. Opening it up to the floor. Do we have any questions, queries? Councillor Kerr.
Like the previous one, this feels as a sort of almost like a Dragon's Den situation, that we've got a brilliant idea who would like to give us some money and what do we as the Dragon want to have in return. But clearly we've explored that scenario already, but I still think it's an example of why we should be potentially having the opportunity to do something more commercial. And we do have people with estates experience within the authority who might be able to contribute on that sort of thing, which is less specialist than the engineering and training side that we talked about earlier. The other thing that I feel slightly uncomfortable about on this is the nature of the loan and who is going to benefit from our investment. It doesn't feel to me as much of a facility for the economic support of the city as much as the enabling somebody to expand their business more quickly than they otherwise would do. And I therefore just, that is the due diligence and the probity issues about why these investors, why this site, why, and I just want to have the assurance that the officers are absolutely sure that this is being done for the right reasons for the city and not because somebody is encouraging that as a right thing to do for other reasons.
Okay, I'm a little bit confused about that, but I don't know if an officer can respond, or whether you want to take it in confidential items. Or...
It's probably easier to take it in confidential items, but I guess the one comment I would make in response to Councillor Kerr's question is that we always absolutely have to be satisfied through our due diligence and work with applicants that there is a case for intervention. There's a justifiable reason why council funding is required, and usually that comes down to market failure. So there has to be evidence that other avenues have been explored, that there are commercial and viability reasons why usual routes to funding through bank lending or investment aren't available. And that will be the case on this project, as with all others that we deal with. So that's my headline answer, and then obviously we can go into further detail later.
Thank you. Are any other questions or comments?
I'll just come back on that, because clearly an alternative way to deal with this would be for the council itself to CPO the ground and put together a project and take it forward within our own mantle, rather than in supporting somebody else to do that. And then the risks would be different, the opportunities would be different, and that would be an alternative which would then be in a much more transparent manner in terms of our use of the funding. But was that explored?
Again, a headline answer if I may, Councillor Kerr, but in terms of the risk profile, clearly we are able to acquire properties, we're able to directly deliver projects, but that comes with a different risk profile to an opportunity like this one, which is about supporting another party with particular development and property development expertise to deliver at pace. So the 2 points I would highlight are, firstly, this will be achieved quicker, undoubtedly, than if we were to pursue or try and use CPO powers to acquire, or even indeed if we were to acquire ourselves. And secondly, the risk for the council is limited to the risk associated with the lending, rather than the risk associated with holding and regenerating property in the city centre, which is obviously a very different risk profile that obviously we would need to manage in a different way. Therefore, this is a preferable route, I would argue.
Okay, so on that then, risks. As you know, I'm somebody who always likes to look at the risks and explore them. So obviously this is just initial phase one. You know, it's not going to specifically deliver outcomes. It's a route down the path. Loan security quite rightly means that the council takes legal charge of the site. However, let's say there was a financial economic shock worldwide, UK, whatever, or a pandemic, for example, that changes the dynamics completely of the financial picture, and potentially a default, which means council take ownership of the asset, and potentially own in the long term. Have the revenue implications of that been fully considered? And where does it sit on the risk register? Because, you know, unforeseen, we didn't know COVID-19 was going to hit us. Had this been just before then, we may be looking at a very different kind of outcome. Hopefully with this outcome's going to be. So can you just walk me through that risk process?
Certainly, Chair. So I guess the first point around risk relates to the approach we've taken. We've chosen a lending route, and in terms of security, we're comfortable, subject to further due diligence, but based on what we know, we are comfortable that the loan to value ratio, i.e. how the amount of lending that we're giving compares to the actual value of the asset and the difference between the two, there's enough headroom in that to mitigate some of that risk. So it would take a lot for the value to come down, because the particular parts of the city centre, including this one, have seen market failure over a long period of time, and that's affected values. So they're already low already. So it would take a lot for values to go even lower to be to put our lending at risk in terms of the loan to value ratio, if that makes sense. And then the second part of your question was around if we were to ever have to call on that security and take on that site. Well, we don't have any revenue estimates or implications built in, because that is a scenario beyond the risk management we're doing now. So it's somewhere we hope we would never get. But obviously, if we ever did get to that point, we'd have to work with property colleagues and understand how we could best realise the value of that asset without having to hold on to the property. So how could we liquidate that and use that to pay off the borrowing? Is that? Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, queries, comments on this item? Does anybody have any recommendations to Cabinet on this item? No? Okay, moving on then. Item 12, which is contract and financial procedure matters. Item 12 is compliance with contract and financial procedure rules.
Thank you, Chair. That's me.
Right.
Hi, I'm Tony Nash, Head of Finance. This report deals with several items. I'm going to take you through each one. There's quite a few, so just bear with me. Shall I take questions at the end, or do you want me to start between each one?
Let's take a pause between each one and see if there's any questions. I
Yeah.
think that'd be the best
Thank
bet.
you. So item 1 is the addition of a new scheme to the capital programme at the value of £68,000. It's to purchase vehicles for drainage and flood risk management purposes, including emergency responses to any flood events in the city. The current vehicles that support this team are the oldest in the fleet and require replacement. Leasing of these vehicles is not viable because the vehicles require specialist installation of drainage maintenance equipment and fixtures and fittings, which would not be permissible under a lease agreement. The available budget is within the existing flood defence capital programme, and this will be transferred to the vehicles, plant and equipment programme to fund the purchase of these vehicles. It's recommended to add this scheme to the capital programme. That one.
Thank
Any
you.
questions?
Does anyone have any questions or comments so far? No? Okay, carry on.
So item 2 is recommending the acceptance of funding for public health, and this is rough sleeping, drug and alcohol treatment funding to the value of £319,000 from the Office for Health Improvement and Disparities. As part of the government's intention to reduce rough sleeping and address some of the links to substance misuse, the council was previously given the opportunity to bid for this grant and improve alcohol and drug outcomes for rough sleepers. The government has confirmed a third tranche of this funding, and it will be available for the financial year 24-25, and the indicative allocation is the same as 23-24. The report outlines what the grant must be spent on, and it includes support, continuing care and building resilience. Also, delegated authority is requested to the Strategic Director of Peoples in consultation with the Director of Finance and the Cabinet Member for Integrated Health and Adult Care to enter into all necessary contracts and agreements associated with this funding once finalised and accepted.
Thank you. Any comments, questions on that item? No?
No.
Okay, carry on.
Item 3 is for the acceptance of 1.7 million adult social care market sustainability and improvement funding from the Department of Health. The government has recently announced the allocation of ring-fence funding through the Market Sustainability and Improvement Fund for adult social care, with a particular focus on workforce pay. The purpose of the grant is to enable local authorities to make improvements to adult social care, in particular to increase the social care workforce capacity and retention, reducing social care waiting times and increasing fee rates paid to social care providers. It's recommended to accept this funding and approve delegated authority to enter into contracts and agreements associated with this.
Thank you. Any questions or comments on that? Councillor Kerr.
I was wondering how much that was enabling additional training for the workforce so that we can actually expand the size of the workforce, which I think is one of the challenges in that area at the moment.
It doesn't split down the amounts. What we're asking for now is to accept it, and there will be some plans for that, so I can get some information back to you. But this is about accepting the funding that's been announced. And
so it would be permitted to use it in that sort of nature to do additional training.
It is about market sustainability, so if you could link it to training, but I can get you some more information on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. And then the next one, I think, is primary care, isn't it?
Yes, the item 4 is to recommend a bid for an acceptance of individual placement support primary care revenue funding from Nottingham City. This is £755,000, and it's for a period of 18 months from September 23 to March 25. The bid for funding is to provide support for Derby citizens whose mental and physical health is a barrier to finding work or maintaining their employment. The Derby Adult Learning will deliver individual placement support to patients accessing primary and community care through a partnership embedded within local communities, employers, employments and skills networks, and the Health and Care Place-based partnership. Again, for expedience, delegated authority to spend within the scope of the grant conditions is requested for the Strategic Director of Peoples in consultation with the Cabinet Member for Children, Social Care, Learning and Skills and the Director of Finance.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, is this a ring-fenced amount from Nottingham, or is it, do we get it competitively with Nottingham?
It is from Nottingham. I think Nottingham are pulling all the funding together, and this is our allocation.
And this will be passported to us for us to spend in whatever way.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Okay, next one is Home Office grants.
Yeah, item 5, recommendation to bid for and accept Home Office grants. There's quite a few. The report outlines the request to claim for and accept asylum and resettlement support grants. Claims can be made by local authorities to support beneficiaries in support of beneficiaries who have arrived in the UK through recognised relocation and resettlement schemes, or those supported in accommodation through asylum support. The grants include Home to the Ukraine, estimated up to £1 million. This scheme allows individual residents in the UK to sponsor named Ukrainian guests. The Afghan Permit Resettlement Scheme, estimated to be up to £2 million. And this scheme will prioritise those who have assisted the UK efforts in Afghanistan. There's an asylum dispersal grant, around 1.7 million, to aid procurement of properties to accommodate asylum seekers. And Afghan bridging to hotel support, which is £500,000, which will deliver wraparound support services to Afghan refugees living in bridging hotels. And to enable this funding to be used in a timely manner, delegated approval is requested to award the monies relating to these grants to the Strategic Director of Communities in Place in consultation with the Cabinet Member for the Cost of Living, Equalities and Customer Inclusion and the Director of Finance.
Thank you. Are there any questions or comments on this one? Councillor Kerr. Oh, sorry. Councillor Collin and then Councillor Kerr.
We know that Derby is really challenged for its housing at the moment, and there's a finite amount of housing in existence and being built, as we've talked about earlier this evening. And I really recognise, I think the Homes for Ukraine is a really valuable scheme, and I think that supporting people to be living with others here is really important. And I don't know whether any of the others are actually looking at that sort of support for enabling people to make additional use of existing housing stock that is already being used so that we can use it more fully, or whether it is only towards the purchase of properties which will drive the prices up within the city and make it more difficult for us to purchase properties to go within our within the council's HRA, or for Derby Homes to purchase, or whatever. So is it only for dedicated purchase, or can we use it in more flexible manners to support people?
Thank you. It's a good question. My understanding is we can use it in more flexible manners to support this, but I'll get you some more information from the service and email it round to everybody, just to reassure you.
Thank you. Councillor Khan.
Yeah. Is this right, me understanding that you're going to be making a bid to the Home Office for, and this money be ring-fenced for this use?
Yes.
And how long is this funding going to be for?
I'm not sure if we've got to spend it by a certain time. I can get that information for you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've got one query. So, at least one of these areas, or well, at least one, maybe more, are creating, I understand, budget pressures on the council. Is that a true statement, or as things stand right now?
It's not coming through in period 5 monitoring, but there could be a potential pressure, which we're probably mitigating, so I can look into that.
So my point is that if we already have budget pressures in one or more of these areas of support, the grant that the bids, and there's 4, will that be for additional support then? It won't be to necessarily deal with the pressures that we currently have, or will it be in addition to deal with any pressures and offer additional support?
Yeah, we would be able to use it to deal with forecast pressures that we've got. But like I say, I don't think there are any in at the moment. But if we are looking to forecast them in the future, yes, we'd be able to use this to mitigate that.
Okay. So how is the check and balance in terms of if we have pressures now? I suppose it's just reassurance that the bids that we're putting in are going to cover the cost of the city, the burden the city takes on looking after these various.
We are asking for the maximum amount of the allocation. This is our allocation in effect.
Right, okay.
So I don't think it would be time limited. Again, I think we'll get to use it, but I can just check that. I can check those details. And if things do come up in the medium term, we'll be able to utilise this in the MTFP.
Right, okay. I think I understand that, but it was just reassurance to ensure that we're not taking on huge budget pressures by placing bids. That was my point. Okay. Any more questions on this? Comments? No? Okay. Moving on.
So item 6 is a contract waiver to enable an extension of a contract with Water Plus Group for 1 year. The council appointed a water bill validation specialist in February 21 for a 2-year period to gather data required to go out to market to re-tender for this contract. The council have been advised that the water bill validation work is not yet completed, and therefore it will not be possible to go out to market for a new provider until the data gathering exercise is complete, and this will inform the tender process. So it's therefore recommended to extend the Water Plus contract.
Any questions, comments on that? No? Okay. Moving on to the final item.
The final item, Chair, I haven't got the detail on. So it's been added. I was on leave last week and it's been added in. So if nobody else has got the detail on that, I'll have to email you that round unless it's in with your papers for the private part of it, but I haven't got the detail on that.
Okay, thank you. So we'll deal with this in confidential session. It's allocated grant funding from another source to the value of £571,000. Okay.
Chair, in relation to that, you're right, it comes up in confidential matters. I could give a very brief overview if you wanted.
Please do.
This is a good news story. Government have awarded us some grant. The grant is currently embargoed by government at the moment, so I can't talk in the public part of the meeting about the specific source of the grant, what it's going to be used for, or the amount. But I can say it is to help with 2 sites that we're housing development sites that we're trying to take forward, Chair, and I can give members more of the detail in the confidential part of the meeting, if that's helpful. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay. If there are no comments, recommendations to Councillor Kavanagh on that, then we'll move on. Okay. Item 13, performance, is Council Delivery Plan and Q1 performance monitoring.
Thank you, Chair. I'm going to take that one. So I'm Sarah Walker. I'm the Head of Strategy, Performance and Partnerships. I'm just going to give you a very quick overview into this report and I'll be happy to take any questions. So the purpose of the report is to present the 2023-24 Council Delivery Plan to Cabinet for approval. The full council plan covering the period of 2022 to 2025 was approved in March 2022 and is focused around the delivery of our 4 city priority themes of green, growth, vibrant and resilient. The plan was subject to a high-level review earlier this year alongside the medium-term financial plan to ensure that it remained relevant to our areas of focus at that point and that we removed any of the commitments that we had already achieved. We review the actions that we will take every year and present a delivery plan that sets out the specific areas that will be subject to monitoring within the year, and that is what is presented within Appendix 1. Progress is reviewed every 3 months, so quarterly, as part of our monitoring reports. Obviously, I'll talk about Q1 in a moment. And following on from COVID-19 and the dynamic context within which we exist now, the actions are also subject to quarterly review to ensure that they remain relevant and they remain focused on the areas that matter most in the delivery of our city priority themes and also our own ambitions as a local authority. Alongside the Council Delivery Plan, we would usually be presenting targets for approval on supporting performance measures. However, given where we are in the performance framework as it stands at the moment, it is proposed that they are presented for consideration and approval alongside the Q2 monitoring information later this year. The report also presents an update on where we are in terms of our Q1 performance monitoring. It's essential that whilst we've been working to update the Council Delivery Plan, that we don't lose oversight of the commitments that we've made within the overarching Council Plan and the progress that we've made in the achievement of these. So presented in Appendix 2 is our standard monitoring report, which has been benchmarked against the 2022-23 Council Delivery Plan, reflecting also those amendments that were approved earlier this year alongside the medium-term financial plan. So of those areas, those performance measures where targets had been set, and I would say this is obviously against last year's targets, 69.4% had either met or exceeded those targets. We are in the process of reviewing and reprofiling these at present, and as I've mentioned, we'll present the updated positions for approval later this year. 76.3% of the milestones that we have in place, not reflecting the changes as part of the plan within Appendix 1, were either on track or completed, and there were no areas reporting major slippage at this point. And just to remind members, this is Q1, so this is a period from April to June of 2023. As part of our monitoring, we also reflect our priority projects and our strategic risks. So 67% of our priority projects were either green or amber green, and these continue to be subject to assurance review activity, and when they reach a gateway point, they are considered through a number of different mechanisms. And we had 15 strategic risks on our strategic risk register. The covering report provides an overview of some of the changing profiles, but I would urge colleagues to refer to Appendix 2 on pages 2 and 3, where it gives you a full overview of where risks have been closed, redefined, de-escalated, or scores have changed. So if I can just draw your attention to some key highlights or achievements over 2023-24 so far, we have, as up to the end of June 2023, created 118.8 jobs, so that obviously reflects some of the broader regeneration activity that we're doing. Based on our historical performance, that is a strong Q1 outturn to reflect this year. We have launched our family hubs. 6 of the city's parks have retained their green flag statuses. Nearly 200 households have been assisted through the Healthy Housing Hub with repairs, improvements, adaptations and advice, supporting independence within our communities. We've completed a full review of our local area cost of living strategy, and alongside that, reflecting some of the queries and questions earlier on, we have updated the associated risk register for this area, so we are looking on the horizon at both threats and opportunities in relation to what may come in the future months and years. Really positively, we have increased the number of foster carers that now foster for Derby City Council. So this has been an ongoing priority for us for a number of years, and we've actually increased to 143 at the end of June, which was a 30% rise on the position reported at the end of the last financial year. And we have made progress with the implementation of our new financial management system. In terms of our areas for development, improvement and risk, paragraph 4.15 flags 8 of our strategic risks which are considered to be significant. So based upon our risk management handbook, this is any risk with a score of 12 or more. So whilst there might be a high probability of these risks occurring within the next 12 to 18 months, or their impacts are considered to be significant, I would like to assure members that there are controls and mitigations in place in all of these areas, and we do a lot of work around targeted risk assurance activities and report through to our Audit and Governance Committee twice a year on the assurances in relation to our risk management framework, and also assurances in relation to the risks that are presented within the Strategic Risk Register. If you did want any more information on those, it is presented throughout Appendix 1 underneath each of the themed areas. So in terms of the recommendations that will be made to Cabinet tomorrow, it is to approve the Council Delivery Plan, to note that targets for priority performance measures will be presented alongside the Q2 monitoring report, to note the latest performance position, paying particular attention to our strategic risks, and to note that the Council Plan 2022 to 2025 is under review alongside the review of budgets and the refresh of our medium-term financial plan. I'm more than happy to take any questions on any specific elements of the documents.
Catherine Wright.
Mr. Tom? Yeah, thank you so much for that detailed presentation. I just really wanted to draw your attention to one of the performance indicators under 4.15 on page 5, the third bullet point down that relates to safeguarding matters and adult social care. Are you able to say why there has been an increase in the volume or proportion of safeguarding referrals? Are you able to indicate that? And in terms of which is clearly a significant risk, and what plan of action, strategic plan of action, is there in place to address that significant risk? Thank you.
Okay, Sarah.
Yeah, of course. So the bullet under 4.15 is actually a risk within our strategic risk register. So we are monitoring as part of our performance framework both demand but also outcomes for individuals, and also average waiting times for assessments or reviews. So the detail of that is contained within Appendix 2. There is a significant amount of work that is currently underway around adult social care in line with the actions that we are taking. So we are currently working, we hosted a peer conversation with the region in July, which is forming the basis for the development of an improvement plan, and there is targeted work around all of the areas to ensure that we understand any changes in demand, that we are able to respond to that, and that we are assuring ourselves around the quality of work that is being delivered and how we are supporting adults, both younger and older adults, to positive outcomes. So I would, in the first instance, urge colleagues to look at the content of the report under Resilient in Appendix 2, and then liaise with lead officers in those areas to understand more around the specific actions that we are taking. But I can absolutely provide assurance that there is a significant amount of work underway within this area.
Thank you. Councillor Bolton.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I'm on Appendix 2, page 10, the fifth bullet point down, where it mentions the early years strategy. I'm concerned about the contents of that paragraph because it says there's some slippage, and the fact that the overarching early years strategy is currently paused concerns me somewhat with the cost of living crisis And I know from my own casework experience, there are a lot of families who need the support at the moment. So my first question is that going to be on track to be presented? It says it's paused, and it says it's going to be provided in Q2. Is that on track to be done? I notice it's some slippage. And also, are we meeting our statutory duties as an authority?
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, so I will have to take elements of that question away to service leads. What I can say is obviously within this area, there's been a significant amount of work through the Family Hubs activity, which is looking at our broader offer. It's specifically focused around those 0 to 5 years old. And obviously I can make sure that further information is shared on that, and we are monitoring that as obviously part of our monitoring going forward. In specific relation to the early years strategy, I will have to contact lead officers within that area to see what the progress will be. From our perspective, obviously that's been reported as paused at this point in time. And also from a statutory duty perspective, that would have to be responded to by obviously leads within that area. But I can take that away and certainly ask them to contact you, Councillor Bolton, with a response, and obviously share it appropriately with members of the board.
Councillor Kerr.
On Appendix 1, there have clearly been a number of changes since the previous edition of this. Do you have a tracked changes copy of it that you could share with me?
Over to you.
Yep, so I have a tracked changes copy of all of the work that we do as part of strategic planning, and also I will be able to let councillors know where we've had changes in wording, where things have been introduced, and the source of that alongside the broader update of the document. I'm happy to have individual conversations with colleagues if they would like more information on that, or if obviously the committee want further information, then share as appropriate. But yes, I have a full audit trail on all changes that have been made to the plan.
Councillor Kerr likes a detail. If nobody else has got a question or query or comment, I've got a couple, if that's okay. First one is the inadequate accommodation sufficiency to meet the need for statutory housing duties in the city. We all know this is a really important issue and something which is a real struggle for many local authorities, including this one. And it says this is a new risk added in Q1, so it's a new addition. Just going back to the bid for Home Office grants, is there a correlation between that? Because obviously there would potentially be a further pressure or increased risk of delivering on that, which has already appeared in Q1. Have there been discussions about what potential impact there might be in as a result of the Home Office grants? Because funding is available, obviously, which is a good thing. However, what could that impact be in terms of housing within the city?
Okay, so if I just give a little bit of context to the risk in the first instance, and then maybe consider the funding element separate to that. So this risk was developed over the final quarter of the last financial year, so it's been introduced to the Strategic Risk Register this year. It's really important to reflect to councillors that there are a number of supporting risks that are contained within service risk registers that reflect specific elements of housing need and have their own areas of control and mitigation. So what this is intending us to do is to really take that strategic view across the city, reflecting the number of different cohorts and the number of different areas that contribute to sufficiency and the ability to meet our housing need, that has been the trigger for the development of this, to absolutely ensure that we can correlate, coordinate, align activity across the board. And we are doing this and sharing it with our partners also. There was an update at the last partnership board around housing and some of the strategic pressures that we have. In terms of funding specifically, this obviously mitigation is within the responsibility of the risk owners, and how that funding is used would obviously, as Tony has already been mentioned, will be in the parameters of the definition of the grant and what it appropriately needs to be spent on. Any additional pressures that will come forward from a financial perspective will be reported through the quarterly monitoring. But I can provide assurance that we are looking holistically across the board to try and ensure that we've got controls and mitigations in place.
Thank you. My second question, so this is page 4, delivering our priority projects, waste treatment facility. And operations on the site remain stable, with work being carried out to maintain preservation ongoing, managed through the waste project team. A project director has been appointed, and 2023-24 soft market testing is underway. Can you explain what that soft market testing is? Is that to explore what the waste facility can do for the council in terms of its strategy? Just a little bit more detail on that, because forgive me, but that's the first time I've seen that a project director has been appointed and soft market testing is underway.
Which one are you specifically looking at? Sorry.
So this is page 4, delivering our priority projects, waste treatment facility. I'm assuming it means Synfin.
I don't have any further information on that, so I'm afraid it'd have to come from the lead officers.
Okay. Are there any more comments or queries on this one? No? Okay, we can move on. Okay, so item 14, exclusion of press and public. To consider a resolution to exclude the press and public during consideration of the following item. That under section 100A of the Local Government Act 1972, the press and public be excluded from the meeting during discussion of the following items on the grounds that they involve a likely disclosure of exempt information as defined in paragraph 3 of part 1 of schedule 12A of the Act, and that the public interest in maintaining the exemption outweighs the public interest in disclosing the information. Okay, we just check that this public gallery is empty. Not that there was anybody in today.